I'll call the Planning Commission meeting for Thursday, January 14th to order. Could we have a roll call, please?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Moses?
Chairman Powell,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Ogden.
Here.
Commissioner Chappell,
Here.
Commissioner Coffin, absent, and Commissioner French.
Here.
All right, you have a quorum.
Item 2 is public comments.
We do not have anyone signed up for public comments tonight.
Thank you. Item 3 is approval of previous minutes for December 10th, 2015.
I move they be approved.
Motion's been made to be approved. I hear a second.
Second.
Motion's been made and second. Can we have a vote, please, Mr. Mosley?
All in favor, please respond by saying aye.
Aye.
All right, motion carried. Minutes approved.
Discussion and possible action on application 2015-20113424 concerning a request for a special use permit to construct metal storage units.
All right, if you guys remember, Commissioner French, you might be the only one who wasn't on the Planning Commission at this time. No, you might have been on this.
Here.
Damon Wilds got rezoned for commercial property over at the former Wings property near I-35, just north of College. And he is putting together an application for storage unit. Of course, we do have the ordinance in play right now that does require a special use permit for storage unit construction. So the applicant is here, and I have also left some drawings of the buildings. I know that we have the civils, but I could not find them when I just went back and checked. So I apologize that you can't see where on the property that they're located, but maybe the applicant can give a little bit of a description.
Mr. Wiles, would you like to come forward, please?
And while he's making his way up there, again, just wanted to note, notification was published in the Guthrie News Leader on December 26th of 2015. 6 letters were mailed to property owners within 300 feet. They were the same property owners that were mailed when this property was rezoned back in summer of 2015.
One thing, Mr. Mosley, our attachment showed rezoning from AA to I2. Mr. Wiles shows us that's C3.
It was actually zoned as C3, so I apologize. I don't know why that got in there. That must have been from his original application. If you remember, in June, he actually applied for industrial. There were some concerns over that from the surrounding property owners. He came back and made an amendment to his application to just go C3. So that must be included from the original application. It is zoned as C3 currently.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Wiles?
I don't have any questions. I was hoping you had some questions. Just a brief description, since the site plan is not laid out. This will be going on the front 10-acre property on the west border or west property line, and to the south or closest to College. On that corner of that property is where this is going to be developed. It covers approximately 30% of the 10-acre property.
Is that this part or the
No, the front part.
the front part?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chappell, that's correct. We are vacating that little wing part there is a 1-acre property. Basically, it's 1 acre cut off by itself. We are vacating that for water retention. That's all it's going to be. It's going to maintain water retention right there. So we're not shedding any water within the property to any other property nor to College.
Confirming a little conversation we had prior to just looking at your plans.
Go ahead.
Definitely the metal exteriors not to exceed 60%, and I think you said, if anything, your wainscoting and things is like 43% or something like that, correct?
In clarification of that, they are metal constructed buildings. Everything that faces the public side of College is 40% wainscot or more. Everything that faces the residential area is blocked by a stockade fence, which would be the west property line. Everything that faces the east property side will be future development construction, so it's currently metal construction. It'll have metal buildings and buildings in front of it when the development is complete.
It will have what?
It'll have other metal buildings in front of it and retail structures in front of it.
Okay.
And again, I just want to clarify, the reason that this application is coming for you is because the ordinance that is in play that does require special use permit recommendation from the Planning Commission to be made at the City Council. It is scheduled for next Tuesday night City Council meeting where the City Council will make a final vote on it.
Thank you.
Are we, if you're saying the structures that face college have got the 40% wainscoting, or
Absolutely, everything that what I consider
so-
faces the public
I
view.
guess we're maybe being asked to overlooked the 40% for the rest. Is that something that we can do? Do we need to address
Everything
that?
that's, my request would be everything that's within the property does not have wainscot because it doesn't face the view of the public.
I'm not sure that's how our,
I think that's what we did,
Yeah, reads,
Mr. Ogden, I think that's what we did with the branches down there.
And,
They just did the sides that faced the public street
and
on their metal building. They didn't have to do all the way around it.
And you wouldn't consider the interstate a public street?
You can't see that from the interstate because it's clear up on top of the hill.
They're gonna build on the interstate side of it eventually.
Well, I think we need to make sure we note that we're allowing that since it's not facing, because
I don't think
that
you'll be able to
is,
see it up there, Mr.
that is a little
because of the
contrary
hill.
to the
I think
statute,
so,
actually,
There,
Mr.
there-
Wild.
excuse me just one moment. There is a 12-foot elevation difference from the west property line, from the east property line to the edge of the first building. There's a 12-foot elevation. And then from the I-35 roadside to the top of that property line, there's a 37-foot elevation difference. So that you cannot see it from the highway. You cannot see the side of the buildings from driving by on the highway.
And I think that's certainly a very valid argument, why waste the additional cost to do that. Now, the other side where there's residential, what did you say, there's a fence?
As agreed in the zoning commission, we are going to do a 6-foot stockade fence with a concrete retaining wall, 2-foot retaining wall underneath it, so that there's no maintenance, no grass growing up between the fences and the buildings. Everything from the property line to the back of the building will be concrete. There'll be a concrete water runway, and there's no grass or no maintenance required in that particular dead zone, is what I call it.
And again, not visible.
Not visible from the
it
residential
would be the
property.
east- That'd be the west side.
The only thing you could see is the top gutter of the buildings. You won't be able to see the actual side of the buildings.
Any other questions?
All the questions I have.
I would move that we approve the special use permit.
Motion's been made to approve and seconded. Could we have a vote, please?
Okay, motion to approve. All in favor, please respond by saying aye.
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 All opposed? Hearing none. Motion carried.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming in.
You'll, Mr. Wiles, you'll have the City Council make a final vote next Tuesday night at the 7 o'clock City Council meeting.
Thank you very much.
It's already in the packet.
Item 5 is discussion and possible action on amending design guidelines for residential accessory buildings.
Correct. We actually have our city manager, Bruce Johnson, here. During kind of the later portion of 2015, we obviously saw some applications come in to allow or to consider, I guess, the accessory buildings in maybe residential areas or residential used areas, but zoned commercial. Obviously, they did go before the city council and, maybe just a few questions were raised and everything like that. So when we were forming together kind of how we were going to put this discussion item on, I just asked the city manager, how do we explain the questions that the council had? And so I asked, he offered and he volunteered to come tonight. And so I thank him for that. And if he'll join us. You can sit up here, you can stand at the podium, whatever you
I'll
want.
sit over here like a good citizen I am.
You're welcome anywhere in this
I
building.
Appreciate that. No, I think more than anything else, we were going to try to figure out some design guidelines going future when it comes to accessory buildings, especially in residential areas. And I say residential areas as in both those that are in subdivisions and then those residential areas that are considered to be agricultural in nature and zoned. I think the questions that had been raised to me was those who are currently in subdivisions inside our corporate limits. They can have accessory buildings, they can be metal, and we can have as many as they want. And really the only thing limiting right now that I can tell is probably just the amount of square footage you take up in the backyard. Then someone who may own acreage above and beyond what our typical lot sizes are here in Guthrie, may not have those same requirements placed on them. And I was going to see if we could start having the conversation about what kind of accessory buildings we want in people's backyards. Everything from what we have in our subdivisions all the way up to what people would have in residential or in agricultural areas that people want to build and construct for barns and those types of uses. So that's kind of what I'm here to kind of state is I just wanted to start that conversation on behalf of the city council myself. So we kind of know what to start telling people as they come forward and what they can have and what kind of areas. And then just have the discussion about metal buildings in and of themselves, where they are, whether they're a certain size lot, whether they have to be a certain size setbacks and whatever they may be. And at the end of the day, if it's not metal, then what we're going to have it constructed of, because there's a lot of building materials out there that go on the outside of buildings that are, for lack of a better term, just as non-aesthetic as some metal buildings that we may want to stay away from. So a lot of moving parts, but more than anything else, that's just kind of what I want to start having the conversation on, so we know kind of moving forward where we want to go. So it's just kind of one of those things that right now, if someone coming off the street, they may think this is a double standard, or they may think that we're not treating everyone equally or fairly. So I just want to be able to communicate that to you guys so we can start that conversation, so you guys can go out there and start asking your questions of people and what they'd like to see and what they want, so I can bring it back before council and see if we can all agree on something going forward.
Mr. Johnson, I'd like to ask you, what's your opinion of these, the smaller sheds? We're just basically, you can put one in there and you go get another one and you go get another one.
I think, to me, the number is a lot more important than necessarily the materials in and of themselves. But with that being said, I'll be here to enforce any type of materials that we want to make them out of as an accessory building. But I think more than anything else, we need to have people plan for their backyards just as they do for their front yards. And right now, having the ability to go in and just stack them one on top of each other, and really, like I said, taking up more than a percentage of square footage is our only really requirement that we have out there, that we have as a staff to go out there and limit anything. So I'd like to see if they do bring one in, that at that point in time, they have to come back and meet our regulations of being certain size, certain setback, and made of whatever materials that we agree to.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions?
I guess I have a question.
Yep.
When you're talking about agricultural or rural versus neighborhoods, are you talking about having a different standard?
Yeah, possibly. I think right now, I have had that in my past cities, and the only reason is for that is because of as what we were just talking about a while ago with sight lines. There may be someone out there, and which I've run into before, that has 20 plus acres, and you'll never see the middle of their property, and that's where they want to build their accessory building. And the fact that it's made out of a certain material matters a lot less than it does the people who are living on lots that are 25 by 100 foot long. And people can easily recognize and see those. So it's each decision we make does have effects on both the community at large and to neighbors around them. But I just want to have that conversation and see if there's something that we can be agreeable to going in the future. And it may be something that agricultural is more along the line of what commercial is. Or maybe they're completely separate altogether. But at least have the conversation on what we'd like to see done. So I think those are kind of some of the broad strokes that we had at the city council meeting on some of the things that have been brought before us.
You're familiar with what they are now, in other words, with residential, just metal buildings are.
Yeah.
Okay, and of course, we also know many have been bootlegged in, and that has created the problem with folks talking to us. How come they can do it and we can't?
Yeah, and I turn it to akin of, there's going to be, as we go out and we grow the community, there's going to be points in time where we take in large tracts of land, just so we can have the utilities serviced out there to them. But even at that point in time, am I going to hold the person to the same threshold and standard of mowing their 50 acres as I am someone who has a 50 square foot lawn? And the answer is no. And, that's why I've had ordinances I've written that have haying permits. And it might be the same thing for these, is that, your buildings are constructed at this point in time, but if you ever sell off and subdivisions move in, maybe we have a different type of permitting standards and as we go forward together. But I just want to begin the discussion so we can start what I consider to be, filling in our loopholes. So are those people who do want to overly take advantage of how many buildings and what the materials are, that we can start getting a handle on it now.
Have you got any feeling from any of the council members what perhaps an acreage determination might be?
Most of the discussions I've had so far, I think, are going to be somewhere around 5 and above. So, and
Maybe, in other words, allow a little more
leniency that way, yeah.
leniency with that?
Yeah, yeah.
Because, commercial, just like we've just done right now, that was 60/40.
Yeah.
So even if it went to, even if you allowed them to go to commercial, it's still the 60/40 situation.
Correct, and that's why I think that we can have lots of definitions that are placed in there, not only materials but setbacks. It may be a ratcheting system going from 2.5 acres to 5 acres to 10 acres to 15 acres, whatever it may be, and requiring the setbacks and along with that. But I think there's a lot of darts that we can throw at it until we hit the bullseye.
I do recall, several years ago, when there was a big discussion about whether you could park in your yard in the city of Guthrie. And of course, it was talked quite a bit about on Facebook. And one concern, just because I saw it posted over and over again, that there was, when it was being debated, like if you had an acre, you could park in your front yard, but if you didn't, and then it sort of became, well, then people were posting, well, if you've got money and land, you can park in your yard.
Very similar to the fireworks that happened in 2014, whenever those were limited.
Yeah. That would be part of my concern. If you have, if you're in the city limits and you've got a lot of land, you can build a big metal barn. But if you've got a little bitty lot on the west side of town, you see what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah, but typically the uses for the land in and of itself, because at that point in
Would be
time,
different. Okay.
That's the same difference, is that you can't have a cow, and along here on, probably Second and Grant Street, but you can out south of town where you actually have enough land to run it. So
Right.
there's actually a lot of distinctions between, the agricultural and the residential zoning that we have. So I think that just kind of blends in with one of those distinctions.
So maybe the bottom line is you're maybe asking us to revisit our statutes as they are and perhaps consider sizes of lots, perhaps some of these larger areas that the city has annexed,
Yep.
and that we might still continue to allow a little more leniency towards some of these buildings with maybe not quite the architectural requirements to say.
Yes, sir, and I'll be more than happy to help you guys out as we go through that process and answering questions you have and doing whatever research needs to be done in order to see if we can't come to something that's amicable for everybody.
Well, we have had, in the past, we've had workshops to do these kind of things.
That's awesome.
and
I
so
love it.
We might must ask Mr. Mosley to see if we can't schedule a workshop down the line that we can
Okay.
sit and discuss those and have you with us.
Good.
Does that sound all
Be
right?
more than happy to.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Guys,
Yeah.
thanks for having me today.
All right, thank you.
Item 6 is request for future items of discussion.
We got a workshop on that list all of a sudden.
I think we do. We used to have a couple of those. We did one for the digital signs, Cody, as I recall, upstairs. And kind of we all got there and exchanged ideas and pros and cons and arrived at things that, along with planning and with staff. And then things were written up and we okayed them. And of course, they were sent on to the council for final approval. So
Good.
when might that be able to be scheduled? Anybody? Workshop.
We'll let Cody look at a date for us and see
Sounds
if we
good.
all coordinate.
Sounds good.
Item 7, staff comments.
I've got two things real quick. First, before we get too far off, Vice Chairman Ogden, I owe you a discussion on a fence permit. I have not forgotten that, but we Of course, I didn't know how long our discussion was going to be tonight regarding the either of the two discussion items, and so I wanted to keep it a little bit fair for everyone as far as time and everything like that. But I do owe you that. That has been something that's been on since December. We were supposed to get that, or well before December actually. We were supposed to get that, but we knew that it might be a light commission with attendance thereafter, and so it just didn't get put on. And but I promise you that that's definitely on our radar still. We will look to get you a workshop. Commissioner members, I'm sorry, I'm looking through my email, and I can't tell you right now what happened with our email. I can tell you that the savior of the department, Shelby Lewis, is out on vacation this week. I promised her that I would have everything in order. I got the agendas posted online. I don't know what happened with that email. I saw Commissioner Chappell yesterday, and he told me that he was excited about all the content that was provided. At that point, I had kind of assumed that everyone got it. So I apologize if there was any kind of miscommunication there. That certainly was not my intent. But my last comment that I want to make. Of course, the city manager just visited with us, and he's been in since August of 2015. And obviously, the accessory buildings have been, really kind of hot since he got here. I appreciate his willingness to work with the city council on kind of educating on what the rules were, what's in our strategic plan. Of course, those kinds of bits of information not only come from staff, but as well as the planning commissioners as well. So thank you guys, and thanks to the city manager for helping educate them on how they can reach the decision. So I certainly do appreciate that. And with that, I'm long-winded and done.
Thank you, Cody.
That is nothing.
Got
Item
nothing?
8, commission comments. Mr. Chappell?
I don't have anything.
I'm scared to ask Mr. Aldridge.
Oh, perhaps with our workshop schedule, that fencing thing, I think Mr. Chappell ran into that same thing. We were asked about that, a few phone calls, and perhaps we can add that to our little workshop
Okay.
discussion. So just to clarify some fencing comments, because there's a little gray area there too, apparently. And maybe also one thing we discussed on talking about some of this thing that the city manager brought up is we seem to have run into a few questions occasionally on corner lots. So maybe we can address that as far as setbacks and things. We run into that even with our buildings. Suddenly those folks that have corner lots run into a couple of setback problems, and maybe we need to clarify it just for their convenience a little bit better too, something to look at. That's all I have.
Thank you. Mr. Fritsch?
Have nothing, thank you.
I have nothing. I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
We are adjourned.
You're good.
Thank you.
Great.